May it please the court. This is Vanessa Sullivan. And over there sits Danielle Dawson, the defendant. The defendant was Miss Sullivan's designated driver. The defendant was the designated driver that drove drunk. And because the defendant was the designated driver that drove drunk, Miss Sullivan is dead. Vanessa Sullivan was a beautiful young woman. Had you asked her father about her, he would have told you that Vanessa had grown into a woman more strong and caring than he could have ever hoped for. Had you asked her mother about her, she would have told you how proud she was, because her little girl wanted to be an attorney, just like her mom. September 24th, 2010 was Vanessa's 21st birthday. She planned to go out, have a few drinks with some friends, and return home safely. The members of the jury, Vanessa Sullivan no longer has any plans. Because on the morning of September 25th, the car she was riding in crashed into a tree and a utility pole, and she died. That day, Miss Sullivan invited her best friend and the defendant out to a local bar. You're going to hear from Miss Sullivan's best friend. She's going to tell you what Vanessa can't. She's going to tell you that on that day, the defendant agreed to be the designated driver for the group that night. However, after agreeing to be the designated driver, the defendant continued to order alcoholic drinks throughout the entire night. You're going to hear from the defendant's server that night. We believe that that server is going to tell you that the defendant was drinking from 2 p.m. that afternoon all the way until 12:45 the next morning. Now you're going to hear that throughout that night, the defendant was asked to stop drinking because her companions were worried about her consumption of alcohol and driving later on. But the defendant refused. You're also going to hear that the defendant was offered cab rides and a number of options to take home, a number of options to get home. We believe you're going to hear that the defendant continued to refuse all of those options, grabbed the keys, and got behind the wheel of the car. On that ride home, we believe you're going to hear that the defendant was speeding. Not only was the defendant speeding, but she was speeding in the pouring rain on a dark street. The defendant had chance after chance to stop speeding, but she didn't. You're also going to hear that the defendant was swerving uncontrollably. She had chance after chance to pull over, but she didn't. Eventually, the defendant swerved too much and lost control of that vehicle, and it crashed, killing Miss Sullivan. After that accident, the defendant was taken to the police station to take what's called a breath alcohol concentration test, just to see how drunk she was when she was behind the wheel of that car. You're going to hear from the expert that administered that test, and we believe that expert is going to tell you that the defendant's blood alcohol concentration was over twice the legal limit that night. That is why we are here. You see, as the prosecution, we have the burden of proof. Prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of driving under the influence of alcohol and murder. We have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt. Now that's just a doubt for which you've got a common sense reason. We believe you're going to find the defendant guilty of driving under the influence after you hear from that expert. We believe you're going to hear that the defendant was reckless because she ignored the risks she was taking when she got behind the wheel of that car, and that those risks were substantial and unjustifiable. And by ignoring those risks, she displayed an extreme indifference to human life. Members of the jury, the reason Vanessa's parents can no longer throw her celebrations but put flowers at her grave is because the defendant was the designated driver. The defendant was the designated driver that drove drunk on September 25th, 2010. And because the defendant was the designated driver that drove drunk, Vanessa Sullivan is dead. Thank you.
Opening statement. May it please the court. Blame is a terrible thing to unrightfully accuse someone of murdering another human being. But unfortunately, we are here today because the state of Midlands has done just that. They have been blinded by the need to blame at the hands of overzealous prosecution, and this woman is suffering the unjust consequences. On September 24th, 2010, Vanessa Sullivan died in a car accident. Today, you will hear the story of her 21st birthday, which is followed by Danny Dawson driving her and a friend home on dark roads, in dangerous weather, and with wildlife occupying the middle of the streets. Let me start by saying that we are truly sorry for this loss. The entire community of Midlands is sorry for this loss. But what should not be looked past is that Danny Dawson is most sorry for this loss. Now, we the defense are here to tell you about these mistaken indictments so that you will understand that we are just as dedicated to finding responsibility as the prosecution. Today, you will hear from Danny Dawson herself, who will tell you that the guilt she feels from driving while intoxicated on the night of the 24th is a haunting pain. She has admitted to driving while intoxicated. Her and the defense counsel are aware that this action is unjustifiable, and as a result, Ms. Dawson has admitted guilt to negligent homicide. But we, the defense, do think it is wrong, unjust, and terribly indecent of the state of Midlands to pursue the charge of murder. This case is not about murder. The impressions the prosecution have just stated of Danny Dawson are inaccurate at best. Today, you will learn that she tried to stop drinking on the night of the 24th, but was mistakenly served a shot of grain alcohol. She tried to make the sacrifice to keep her drunk friends off the road that night. She tried to do the right thing. But the state has been blinded by the need to blame. A blame taken so far that the fanatical prosecution has taken the charges all the way to murder, even when the facts are inconsistent. Dr. Ashley Norton will tell you about some of these inconsistent facts today. He will testify that there are too many controversial factors present during the breath alcohol concentration analysis results for the results to be accurate. You'll also hear from Ms. Leslie Roman, traffic accident reconstructionist, who will tell you that Ms. Dawson's attempts to avoid an obstacle and then regain control of the car were consistent with the actions of a driver swerving to avoid a deer. Now, evidence like this produces doubt in this case, and is not enough to prove that Ms. Dawson is guilty of murder or even recklessness. She may have been careless, but not reckless. What will the prosecution try to prove today? Will they try to prove that Ms. Dawson as a sole human being was responsible for these events? Or that she was even aware of them? Because if so, they will not be stating facts, and they'll know they're not. The evidence today will only too clearly show that the accident on the 24th was caused by a series of uncontrollable events. Now, the prosecution, like they stated earlier, have the burden of proof. In order for any charge to proceed, they must prove each and every element beyond any reasonable doubt. You will see that they won't be able to accomplish this task. The guilt and sorrow that Danny Dawson feels for driving while intoxicated on the night of the 24th will never suffice for the fact that Vanessa is gone. We can't change that. But you, the jury, can listen to the evidence presented and show that the state has simply been blinded by the need to blame. Thank you.
Your Honor, the prosecution calls Taylor Hopson.
You've been doing this one.
Now, Ms. Hopson, I know you, but could you introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, I'm Taylor Hopson.
Why are you here?
I'm here because I was with Vanessa the night she died.
You'll have to excuse me, Taylor. Who exactly is Nessa?
Well, Vanessa's my best friend, Vanessa.
Now, we'll get to Vanessa in just a minute. But could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, I'm a senior political science major at Midland Center University, but I kind of had to put school on hold after everything that happened with Vanessa.
You said Vanessa was your best friend. Could you tell us a little bit about her?
I met Vanessa when I was 8. Her family moved in next door to mine. We ended up in the same class together at school. We're both kind of small. We got picked on a bit. We learned to stick together, and we've been inseparable ever since.
You said you were with Vanessa on the night that she died.
Yes.
Why?
It was Vanessa's 21st birthday, so we were going out to celebrate.
Was it just the two of you celebrating?
It was supposed to be just Vanessa and I, but she ended up inviting some girl from school.
Who is that?
Danny Dawson.
Do you see Danny Dawson in courtroom today?
She's over there in a green sweater.
Now, where did the three of you go to celebrate?
We went to a place called Chucky's. It's a local restaurant in town.
What did you all plan on doing at Chucky's?
Well, it was Vanessa's 21st birthday, so we were planning on going out and celebrating and having a few drinks at the bar.
Were all three of you planning on drinking that night?
Vanessa and I were planning on drinking.
Well, what makes you think that the defendant wasn't going to drink that night?
Before we went out that night, Vanessa told me that she talked to Danny and that Danny told her she wasn't going to drink.
Did you take Vanessa at her word?
Well, I did, and to be sure, when I got to the bar, I went up to Danny and I asked her if she was going to be drinking. She told me that anyone could have a few drinks and be fine.
Now, you said you went up to Danny at the bar. Was the defendant already there?
Yes, Danny was already sitting at the bar when I got there.
To your knowledge, Taylor, had the defendant been drinking before you got there?
Well, when I asked Danny, she said she wouldn't have anything more to drink. So she had been drinking.
After the defendant told you she wasn't going to have anything more to drink that night, did she?
Yes. As soon as we sat down at the table, Danny ordered a whiskey, and then a shot, and a beer, all before the band even came on that night.
Objection. This is speculation. The fact that she ordered drinks does not mean that she in fact drank the drinks.
Ms. Hopson, what happened after the band came on?
After the band came on, I left for a minute to go to the bathroom. When I came back, Danny was on stage. She'd gotten hold of one of the band's guitar, and she was playing it on stage and wouldn't get off until a bouncer came and pulled her off.
After a bouncer had to pull the defendant off stage, did she continue to order drinks?
After she got off the stage, someone sent a round of complimentary drinks over to the table for Vanessa's birthday.
Did you all have those drinks?
The drinks were whiskey and ginger ales. Vanessa and I don't like whiskey, so Danny was the only one drinking them.
After the defendant had those 3 whiskey and ginger ales, did she continue to drink?
Yes.
What did she have next?
Well, after that, the band came over to say hi, and they ordered us another round of drinks.
Did you all drink those drinks as well?
Yes, we did.
Around what time was that, Taylor?
That was just before we left the bar.
How was the defendant behaving when you all were getting ready to leave?
As we were walking out of the bar, Danny was stumbling through the parking lot, and she leaned over to open the car door for me. Her breath just smelled like beer and liquor.
Ms. Hopson, I've got to ask you this question. If you knew that the defendant had been drinking the entire night, and she was stumbling in the parking lot and her breath reeked of alcohol, why did you get in that car?
Vanessa wouldn't leave her car at the bar. And I didn't want to leave her alone. She was my best friend. I just couldn't leave her.
Did it cross your mind to call for a cab?
Well, when we were leaving, there was a cab driver there, and he offered us a ride, but Danny said she just didn't want to pay for the cab.
I want to talk about that drive home after the defendant refused a cab. How was she driving?
As soon as we pulled onto the road, Danny started speeding. She was going so fast, and I begged her to slow down.
Did the defendant slow down?
No.
Taylor, this is going to sound like an odd question. But what was the weather like that night?
It was raining that night. It was raining pretty hard.
Now, did the defendant continue to speed all the way home?
Yes, Danny was speeding the whole time, and Vanessa and I begged her to stop, but she just wouldn't slow down.
To your knowledge, did the defendant seem to have control of the vehicle?
No, Danny was speeding, and then she just started swerving all over the road and in and out of her lane. Vanessa and I asked her to stop again and again. She wouldn't listen.
Did you see any reason as to why the defendant was swerving?
No, there was nothing in front of the car.
What was Vanessa doing after she begged the defendant to stop swerving and slow down?
Well, then Vanessa offered to call her dad so he would have more time to get home, so that Danny could slow down.
Did the defendant slow down after Ms. Sullivan said you would have more time to get home?
No, Danny wouldn't listen.
Did she ever get in touch with her dad that night?
No, Vanessa had to leave him a message.
Have you heard that message before?
Yes, I have.
Would you recognize it if I played it for you?
Yes.
Pass the witness.
Awesome. Now, I know this is going to be hard for you, but I'm going to ask you a few questions.
All right.
You knew Vanessa since you were a child, correct?
Yes, we've been best friends since we were 8.
And you've known her mother since that time as well?
Well, yes, I was over at their house all the time.
And your opinion of Miss Sullivan as a parent, would you describe her as a strict parent?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance to Ms. Hopson's opinion of Vanessa Sullivan's mother. It doesn't make any part of the prosecution's burden more or less likely.
It does prove the
Then the objection is sustained.
Your Honor, I move to strike opposing counsel's question.
the jury so
Disregard.
instructed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the night in question. The night of the 24th, you asked Danny to be the designated driver.
Well, actually, Vanessa did, but I spoke to Danny about it.
Who was to be the designated driver before Danny was invited?
Vanessa invited Danny so that we would have a designated driver, so Danny was always supposed to be the designated driver.
Because you wanted to get drunk?
Well, it was Vanessa's 21st birthday, so we were planning on celebrating.
And how many drinks did you consume that night?
That night, I didn't have more than 2 or 3.
And how many did you see Danny drink?
Danny was ordering so many drinks, I couldn't even keep track.
But there were times that you weren't with Danny that night, correct?
Right, I went to the bathroom, and I even got to sing for Vanessa on stage for a little bit.
Like you said, there were times you were singing on stage. There were times that you were alone with Vanessa?
Right, there were a couple times where I was on stage with Vanessa.
Now you're kind of a stickler for drinking and driving, is that correct?
Yes, I don't drink and drive.
You're what's referred to as a caddy's best friend.
I guess you could say that, sure.
And you're not comfortable with people drinking even after one drink? Driving it even after one drink?
No, I would never do that.
But Vanessa had a curfew that night, correct?
That's right, we had to be home by 1.
And what time did you finally leave the bar?
We left around 12:45.
So you had 15 minutes, and you had to get home in 10 minutes.
It takes around 10 minutes to get home.
Now you passed the cab. There's a reason why you didn't take the cab other than Danny refused, correct?
Sorry.
You did not want to take the cab yourself because you were afraid that Vanessa's mother would be angry that the car was not there in the morning.
I didn't want to take the cab because I didn't want to leave Vanessa alone. She was my best friend and it was her birthday. I didn't want to leave her.
But the car had to be there the next day, or Vanessa was going to get in trouble?
The car had to be where?
The car had to be home?
Yes, Vanessa's mom wanted her car home, and Vanessa didn't want to leave her car at the bar overnight.
So it was Vanessa that declined the car? That was Vanessa that declined the cab ride?
No, it was Danny.
But it was Vanessa's reason?
Vanessa didn't want to leave the car, and Danny didn't want to pay for the cab, so that's why we didn't take it.
So, even in all this, you witnessed Danny get behind the wheel?
Right, Danny drove us home that night.
And you got in the car as well?
Of course.
And you took the route of Canyon Road?
Yes, that's the way to Vanessa's house.
And this road is familiar to you?
Yes.
You're aware that it's called, that has been referenced to in the community as the death
Objection,
zone?
Your Honor. Opposing counsel is about to elicit hearsay testimony.
This goes towards the dangers of the road that night and how the road itself was an extreme danger and an extreme risk itself.
But how, I guess, is your question not eliciting hearsay testimony? Is this a hearsay objection, basically? Is that what you're trying to make? A hearsay exception?
If it's a hearsay objection, I would say,
Articulate an exception to hearsay that you're trying to get out of this witness.
I would say that it is.
I'll let you ask the question and develop this testimony, but if it is hearsay, then it'll be excluded.
Okay. You're aware that this road has been called, referenced to the community as the death zone.
I have to reurge my objection, Your Honor. Opposing counsel has not laid any foundation to establish this as an exception to the hearsay rule.
It's sustained.
I ask that you instruct the jury to disregard.
She hasn't answered the question, so there's nothing for them to disregard.
Yes, Your Honor.
But it was you who directed Miss Dawson down the road that night.
Well, yes, that's the way to Vanessa's house. That's the road you have to take.
You gave her directions through that backcountry road,
Right, so we could get to Vanessa's house.
through the winding curves,
Yes.
up and down the hills.
Yes, that's the way the road goes.
in absence of streetlights,
There was a light that night on Kingport.
with prominent wildlife about?
I'm not so sure about that. I didn't see any animals.
No further questions.
No redirect, Your Honor. Maybe let me step down.
State calls Pat Lawrence to stand. Our permission to set the demonstrative. May I proceed, Your Honor? Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, sir. My name is Patrick Lawrence.
How are you involved in this case?
I was the waiter that night at Chuggy's. I served Miss Dawson and her friends all the drinks that they had that night.
What do you do for a living?
Right now, I don't really do much. Just kind of sit at home, doing a lot of hunting. Job market ain't too good right now, so, you know, I'm looking if you know anything.
You said that you served the defendant her drinks at the bar that night. I want to keep track of just how many drinks the defendant had, so if it's okay with you, I'm just going to keep a tally.
All right.
Your Honor, do you mind if I get your position where I can see the demonstrative?
Remember, y'all can move around the courtroom. You don't have to keep asking me
Yes,
information.
I apologize.
What time did you get to Chuggy's that day?
I had to get there pretty early in the afternoon. I had to do some training. It was my first day of work, so they wanted to show me how to take drinks from the bar to the table and how to properly write them down on the bill. So I got there about 2 o'clock.
Was the defendant there?
Yes, Miss Dawson was there.
What was she doing?
She was drinking. She was drinking some beers and some mixed drinks at the bar with the bartender. I guess she had a pretty bad day at an interview that she had.
How many drinks did the defendant have?
Between when I got there at about 2 o'clock and when I started my shift, she had 6 drinks.
I'm going to tally up 6 drinks.
Objection. Opposing counsel is referring to facts, not evidence.
Your Honor, the witness just testified that he saw the defendant drink these drinks. That the defendant was at the bar having 6 drinks between the time the witness arrived and the time he started his shift.
Then proceed. Overruled.
Now, Mr. Lawrence, after those 6 drinks, how was the defendant acting?
Well, she was acting pretty drunk. I mean, she'd had quite a few, and she was stumbling around. She was slurring her words. She even spilled one of her drinks on me when she got up to walk across the room. She had some cocktail or something and just kind of spilled it all over me. I don't know, she was kind of a mess.
What did you do after the defendant spilled her drink on you?
Well, I obviously went to change my shirt. Thankfully, I had another one in the car. I was about to start my shift, so I had to get my work shirt on.
What happened when you started your shift?
I started serving my customers.
Was the defendant one of your customers?
Yes, she was. Her and her 2 friends sat at one of the tables that I was servicing.
What did the defendant order?
When they sat down, she had a whiskey on the rocks. It's just straight whiskey over ice.
I'm going to tally up a whiskey. Did the defendant have anything else to drink?
After that, they switched to tea and sodas for a while. I think they were trying to slow down a little bit on the alcohol.
You said everyone was drinking. Do you know if the group had a designated driver?
Yes, I asked them who the designated driver was, because I was getting a little concerned at that point. And Miss Dawson raised her hand. I thought it was a joke at first, because she was pretty drunk.
Objection. That piece of testimony is substantially more prejudicial than probative.
Overruled.
Could you please continue?
Yeah, she raised her hand when I asked who the designated driver was. I didn't think it was her, because she was already pretty drunk, but her friends told me that she was, in fact, the designated driver.
Well, after you found out the defendant was the designated driver, did you continue to serve alcohol?
Yes, sir, I did.
Well, why did you do that?
Well, sir, she ordered more alcohol. I mean, I'm a waiter. I bring the drinks.
Well, how many more alcoholic drinks did the defendant have?
Throughout the rest of the night, she had 4 more. She had a whiskey ginger, she had a shot, a tequila sunrise, and another shot.
I'm going to tally up 4 more drinks. Mr. Lawrence, how many drinks does that bring us to?
That's 11 drinks.
Now, I want to talk about the drinks the defendant had closer to the time she left the bar.
All right.
What time did she have that tequila sunrise?
She ordered the tequila sunrise after midnight. They were about to leave, and she said that she didn't want the night to end, so she ordered a tequila sunrise, which is orange juice and tequila.
What about that last shot? What time was that?
The last shot was close to 12:45. It was right as everyone was walking out the door. The band called everybody over, and they all had a shot together.
What was the shot of?
It was grain alcohol. It's a pretty powerful piece of alcohol. It's actually just straight alcohol. It's not like tequila or vodka. It's stronger.
Mr. Lawrence, I have to ask you, after the defendant had 11 drinks, why did you let her drive after she left?
Honestly, sir, I didn't let her drive. I delivered the shots to everyone there. There were a lot of people, and I was collecting the glasses, and I took the glasses back to the bar. When I turned around, Miss Dawson and her friends, they were already gone. I ran out in the parking lot because I wanted to try and stop her, but by the time I got out in that parking lot, she was already pulling away.
Pass the witness. Your Honor, at this time, I ask to reserve this as State's A.
No objections, but I do ask that during cross-examination the marshal be flipped over.
It's a bit.
Now, Mr. Lawrence, is it Mr.? I heard opposing counsel refer to you as Miss. I just want to clarify that you are indeed a man.
I'm a man.
Miss Kelsey, thank you. Mr. Lawrence, since you started working at Chuggy's, you were aware that the drinks were usually served on the weaker side, isn't that correct?
Yes, but that night they were actually serving them on the stronger side.
When they were served on the weaker side, they were watered down.
Yes, but I guess that night, because they were going to have a lot of people, they were trying to get more customers, so the owner was telling everybody to serve the stronger drinks so that people would drink more.
So, Mr. Lawrence, to the best of your knowledge, because a drink is stronger, does that necessarily mean it's not watered down at all?
No, if a drink is stronger, it's going to be stronger. It's not going to be watered down.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lawrence, moving on to when you were serving the tables. You were serving Danny Dawson's table, as you stated earlier, yes?
Yes.
And you did witness a period of time when the whole table switched from drinking to drinking soda and tea, yes?
Yeah, for about half an hour they had some tea, and the other 2 girls had soda.
And you offer free sodas to designated drivers, yes?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And when you asked who the designated driver was at that table, there was a period of silence for a while, yes?
No, I asked who the designated driver was, and Miss Dawson raised her hand.
But at first, there was a little period of tension. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was because she didn't want to raise her hand. The 2 girls looked at her, and she kind of raised her hand. It was really awkward because they just kind of stared at her. That was it.
There was also a time during the night, though, when you thought that Taylor Hopson would be the designated driver.
I assumed that girl was pretty drunk.
Mr. Lawrence, now there was also a period during the night when Danny Dawson stopped ordering alcohol, yes?
She ordered a tea.
Well, there was a time when she asked for soda.
No, the whole table switched to tea and soda. Miss Dawson had a tea.
Mr. Lawrence, I'm referring to later in the night. There was a time when she eventually stopped ordering alcohol and asked for only sodas the rest of the night.
No, she still ordered a tequila sunrise at the end of the night.
But eventually she asked for only sodas.
No, she continued to drink.
It is your testimony today that Miss Dawson never, during the entire period of the night of the 24th, requested sodas the rest of the night.
No, she did, but she also ordered alcohol. I guess I'm confused.
But there was a time when she ordered only sodas.
Like I said, the table ordered tea and sodas.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. There was also a time when the whole band ordered a round of shots for the table, yes?
Now, it was at the end of the night. Everyone was kind of making their way out, and the band asked for round of shots for everyone that was left.
And one of these shots was the shots that opposing counsel tallied on that last demonstrative.
Yes.
But it also is true that Miss Dawson, when the band ordered the shots, requested a shot of water. Isn't that correct?
Yes, Miss Dawson asked me for a shot of water, but unfortunately, grain alcohol looks a lot like water. And I brought over probably 15 shots, and I got the water confused. I accidentally gave it to the other girl. I think her name was Taylor. I gave the water shot to Taylor, and I gave the alcohol shot to Miss
And this
Dawson.
is because you mixed up the shots. Isn't that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Now, Mr. Dawson, you didn't stop Miss Dawson from driving off that night, did you?
I tried to. They were in a hurry. I had to take the glasses back to the bar, and by the time I turned around, I mean, they were gone.
Mr. Lawrence, this was your first and last night working at Chuggy's, isn't that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you do hope that Chuggy's goes out of business, isn't that correct?
I called the district attorney when I saw this stuff happen on television. Told her I was there that night and I would testify or talk about anything she needed me to.
And you would like to help shut it down, isn't that correct as well?
I told Mrs. Sullivan that I would help her if she needed my help.
Pass the witness.
No redirect, Your Honor. May the witness sit down?
The state calls Dr. Avery Smith to the stand. Now, doctor, can you introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, I'm Dr. Avery Smith.
Dr. Smith, why are you here today?
I was the person who performed the breath alcohol concentration test on Miss Dawson the night of September 25th, 2010.
Now, before we get to that test, let's find out a little bit about how you're qualified to even be here today. Can you tell us where you went to school?
Yes, I received my undergraduate degree in biochemistry, and then I decided to focus on biostatistics. I received my graduate degree and my PhD in biostatistics from Washington University in St. Louis.
Now, what do you do now for a living?
Now I work for the Midlands Police Department. I am the Director of Forensics here in Midlands. And I'm also Chairman of the Midlands Board for Alcohol Testing, and I'm also a breath test specialist. Basically what I do is I train all of the employees in the state of Midlands on how to use breath to blood alcohol concentration tests.
Well, let's talk about those breath to blood alcohol tests. What type of facts and data would one need to perform one of these tests?
Basically what you need is you need a machine that can convert breath alcohol to blood alcohol, and then you just need someone to provide a breath sample.
Now, after you have these facts and data, can you tell us the methods that you would use to perform one of these tests?
When you're performing a breath to blood alcohol concentration test, you have to do three things. The first thing you have to do is you have to check the mouthpiece of the machine. You have to make sure that there's no excess saliva, that it's clean and clear, so that way you know that there's no external factors affecting the test that you're doing on a certain subject.
And you did that in this case?
Yes, I did. I made sure the mouthpiece was clean.
Now, you said that there were 3 parts to your method. Can you tell us the second one?
The second thing I have to do is I have to calibrate the machine. That basically means I have to make sure that the machine is correctly identifying the amount of breath alcohol and converting that correctly to blood alcohol. The way that I do that is I have a solution that simulates human breath that has a breath alcohol concentration of 0.08. I run that simulator solution through the machine, and if the machine correctly identifies that as 0.08, I know my machine's running correctly.
Now, was that simulator solution running correctly that night?
It was. Before I tested Miss Dawson, I was actually calibrating all of my machines. And the machine I used to test Miss Dawson was one of those that I had just calibrated.
Well, let's talk about that last method right now. Can you tell us what that one is?
I just have to interview the subject of my test, talk to them for a few minutes, observe them, and then I just fill out a checklist saying I've followed all my steps, and then I perform the test.
Now, Dr. Smith, did you apply those methods and procedures reliably to the facts and data in this case?
Yes, I did. I followed all of those steps in Miss Dawson's case.
And you came to your conclusions to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
Yes, I did.
Let's talk about those conclusions then. Dr. Smith, after running the test on Miss Dawson, what was her BAC?
Her blood alcohol concentration was 0.19.
What is the legal limit here in Midlands?
The legal limit in our state is 0.08. Miss Dawson's blood alcohol concentration was over twice that.
Pass the witness.
How long have you been a breath testing specialist in Midlands?
Oh, over 10 years now.
So you set most of the rules and the guidelines for the breath testing programs.
Yes, as the board of directors for alcohol and drug testing, I actually set all of the protocol that we follow here in Midlands.
How long is a few minutes? You stated in the direct that you talked to him for a few minutes. How long is a few minutes?
In order for a test to be accurate, the subject must be observed for at least 15 minutes prior to the administration of the test. In Miss Dawson's case, she was observed for over 25.
She was observed for over 25?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you observe her for those 15 minutes?
Officer Foster, who I trained, observed her for the 20 minutes leading up to the 5 minutes which I observed her. So she was observed for at least 25 minutes.
Okay, where was this observation taking place?
It was taking place partially while she was in custody, while Officer Foster was leading her into the police station, and then we switched hands. I took over, and I observed Miss Dawson.
Oh, thank you. So that took place while she was in the car, in the back seat, right?
Partially, yes, while Miss Dawson was in custody.
Okay, so then, is it possible for somebody to burp silently or belch?
While that is possible, I suspect that Officer Foster would have been able to detect that if that had happened. You see, the squad cars in Midlands, they have a very uncomfortable metal seat where the person in the back is kind of forced to lean forward so the officer can monitor them very closely.
Mm-hmm. So Officer Foster then wasn't paying attention to the roads. He was looking back at Danny Dawson.
You see, our officers are trained to monitor the subjects in the back seat. That's part of the procedure they have to follow when they take someone into custody.
Okay. Then toxicologic 8000. You think that's a reliable machine?
It's very reliable, yes.
Okay. So then you do know that it hasn't. Okay, sorry. Actually, what was Danny Dawson's breath alcohol concentration?
0.19.
So you do know that the toxicologic 8000 hasn't been tested above 0.16, right?
That's actually incorrect.
That's actually incorrect. So you're stating today that it has not been tested over 0.16.
Right. Excuse me. Our machine has been tested in the field at all different kinds of alcohol concentrations. I've actually tested someone who had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.35. So I know that machine runs correctly higher than 0.16.
Okay. So at 0.19, what kind of features? Give me only two features that Danny Dawson exhibited.
She was slurring her words, and she was also exhibiting staggering gait. Basically, she was stumbling.
What staggering gait?
She was stumbling.
She was stumbling, that's all it is?
Yes. If you've ever seen a drunk person kind of
No, I'm not. Can you explain to us better, please?
You're kind of wobbling and walking. Staggering gait's just a fancy way for us to say you're drunk walking.
Oh, okay. I have another question. Sorry. So, sorry, 1 second. Did you think Danny Dawson was drunk?
I did think that she was, yes.
Did you think she was above the legal limit, twice the legal limit?
At first, no, because she told me that she stuck to 1 drink per hour. But I heard her server say that her drinks were stronger and that she was given grain alcohol. And, that kind of explains why her blood alcohol concentration was so high.
Okay, we're going to talk about what Danny Dawson just told you. So she told you she drank 1 drink per hour then?
She mentioned that, and that's why I thought her blood alcohol concentration would be about above 0.08, around there. But the stronger drinks and the grain alcohol, that really explains why her blood alcohol concentration was so high.
Okay, was she cooperative with you?
She willingly provided me with a breath sample, yes.
Okay. The average person can drink at least 1 drink per hour and stay around the legal limit, is that correct?
It depends on the person and what you're drinking.
That's why I said the average person. We're not trying to say anything about Danny Dawson. The average person can drink 1 drink per hour and stay around the legal limit.
If you are drinking a standard drink with 14 grams of alcohol, yes.
So, Danny Dawson did drink 1 drink per hour.
Yes.
That's what she stated to you.
But I believe those drinks were stronger than the average, which explains the high BAC.
Okay. Is it possible, I'm sorry, are you a physician?
Pardon?
Are you a physician?
No, I have my PhD, but that's in biochemistry, not medicine.
So you didn't get to examine Danny Dawson?
I did not perform a physical examination, no.
So you can't tell me anything about her family background?
No, I can't. We don't do that before we perform a BAC. That would take too long, and the alcohol would be metabolized.
That's true. So for in your expertise in your field, are you allowed to do blood testings?
We are. We actually have to get a subpoena for that. I would have had to call the Justice of the Peace and get a subpoena for her blood. Since she willingly provided me with a breath sample, getting a blood sample was unnecessary.
But is it true that blood testing is more accurate than the breath alcohol testing?
Well, there's no conversion, so it takes less time. You're just directly drawing the blood and testing that instead of using the breath middleman.
Okay. Let's go back to, so you're not a physician, you just stated that. You didn't get to test Danny Dawson. Let's go back to, is it possible that Danny Dawson can absorb alcohol at a lesser rate than the average person?
Well, if Danny absorbed alcohol at a lesser rate than the average person, then that would explain her high BAC, so yes.
Okay, pass the witness.
No redirect, Your Honor. May the witness please step down.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution rests its case in chief. If it's all right with Your Honor, we request a brief recess.
Okay, let's go with, be back in here by 5 minutes to 11.
Yes.
Those of
call Leslie Roberts to stand.